Where is this justice, then, that would condemn him? The problem of the salvation of pagans and the unbaptized in general was dramatically felt and suffered by Dante, who dealt with it many times. Already at the start of the poem, on page 161, hearing so many people of great estimation suspended in limbo, he said that great sorrow seized my heart. In Paradise, he returns to the question in tones of vibrant intensity. Speaking is none other than divine justice itself, personified by an immense eagle, formed by thousands of luminous points, that is, by the blessed in the heaven of Jupiter. It is she who expresses Dante's doubts, even if rather unlikely, perhaps because if he had spoken in first person, he would have been using such direct and indignant words to be almost an act of accusation against God. For you would say, a man is born along the shoreline of the Indus River. None is there to speak or teach or write of Christ. And he, as far as human reason sees, in all he seeks and all he does is good. There is no sin within his life or speech. And that man dies unbaptized without faith. Where is this justice, then, that would condemn him? Where is his sin if he does not believe? Paradise 19, 70 to 78. The reply from the eagle is extremely interesting, but complicated and long. It takes up almost 2 cantos. He won't speak more about Indian virtue, but he gives an answer to this anguished cry, and how. He starts with a vehement attack on Dante. Now who are you to sit upon the bench, to judge events 1,000 miles away, when your own vision spans so brief a space? Paradise 19, 79 to 81. Here we touch on perhaps the most intriguing question in the entire poem. All the times that Beatrice, the blessed, or in this case the eagle, speak of the inscrutability of the thinking of God, it deals, page 163, always and exclusively with the problem of salvation. About other arguments, Beatrice exhorts Dante to fix his eyes on the profundity of the eternal counsel, that is, to seek to penetrate the depths of God's thinking, always on that of salvation. I could quote numerous examples, like when Dante has Thomas Aquinas say, "So, too, let men not be too confident in judging." Paradise 13, 130 to 131. Let not Dame Bertha or Master Martin think that they have shared God's counsel when they see one rob and see another who donates. The last may fall, the other may be saved. Paradise 13, 139 to 142. The eagle here, too, that represents the justice of God, starts and finishes his long discourse affirming with determination the impossibility for someone to know who is saved and who is not, and warns about judging. And you mortals, do take care, judge prudently, for we, though we see God, do not yet know all those whom he has chosen. Paradise 20, 133 to 135. On the one hand, there are these continuous exhortations, and on the other, Dante does what? Throughout the poem, he does nothing but tell us about hundreds of people from all times, but above all his contemporaries, quoted by name and surname, whether they are damned or if they are saved. That would be a daft contradiction, a total incoherence, and so very big for not being wished, constructed ad hoc to give a message, stigmatizing those, in those times, who pretended to be able to manage the afterlife, absolving and excommunicating in the name of God, not to mention the indulgences relating to purgatory. Dante didn't make any claim for the truth of what he writes about the afterlife destiny of the 1,000 characters that he met. Page 164. He knows well, and he says so, that it is only a beautiful lie. But he also says that it hides a truth, that is, that it contains a doctrine that in his eyes is a truth. The tragedy is that we remember the characters, the beautiful lie, and most times don't grasp the message. In the words of Gianni Rodari, we only eat up the outer skin. The whole discourse revolves around a central problem, divine justice, evoked by the bold question, where is this justice that condemns to everlasting hell a virtuous Indian because he isn't Christian? What blame could he have where he lives if he has never heard talk about it? It's a doubt that has tormented Dante for a long time. To the blessed of heaven, in fact, he asks, deliver me from that great fast which kept me hungering so long, not finding any food for it on earth. You know what is that doubt which caused so old a hungering in me. Paradise 19, 25 to 33. That such a problem might assail the reason for so long and disturb Dante's moral conscience is clearly affirmed here, writes Sapegno, commenting on these verses, and turns up, on the other hand, in many other places in the poem where the doubt and the disturbance reaffirms itself with insistence, then resolving itself every time in a confirmed reiteration of Catholic doctrine in its strictest formulation, Augustinian and Thomistic. I absolutely do not agree. What does he mean by not having found on earth any food? The argument had been made, and there are answers by Augustine, Thomas, and others, and especially by the Church. But evidently there were answers that did not satisfy him, which is to say, he didn't accept them. The Eagle's answer that, as we will see, is certainly not a confirmation of Catholic doctrine, will instead be for him gentle medicine. Page 165. O earthly animals, O minds obtuse, the primal will which of itself is good, from the supreme good, itself, never moved, so much is just as does accord with it. Paradise 19, 85 to 88. It is an important concept for Dante, who has expressed it in the same words in Monarchy. Quidquic divinae voluntate non consonat, ipsum ius esse non posit. Et quidquic divinae voluntate est consonum, ius ipsum sit. That which does not conform to divine will cannot be just, and that which does conform to divine will is just. Just is he, or her, who vibrates on the same wavelength as the will of God. The fact is, nobody can affirm what this might be. One can only set out on the road to know it, as Dante does. The affirmation that itself never moved is important too. Never. Here we face the Eternal, who doesn't change according to the customs of men. In the following canto we find among the blessed in the heaven of Jupiter one by the name of Ripheus. Who was he? He was an ancient Trojan soldier, mentioned a couple of times in passing in the Aeneid. Can such things be? Dante asks, amazed, pretending to wonder at it. How could a pagan be in paradise? The answer is through grace. God granted him the sight of our redemption in the future, and he believed in that. To give things a semblance of orthodoxy, Dante introduces the idea of grace and even redemption in the future, because Ripheus is placed in the time of the Trojan War, that is, around 1200 years before Christ. But despite his efforts, the salvation of a pagan is impractical, nor are there elements in church doctrine that can make him suppose it. We ask ourselves then, why he ever wanted to save a pagan, and why exactly this obscure character. The critics speak of the mysterious and unpredictable ways with which grace works, but it is not so. In the second last canto of the poem, it is stated clearly, page 166, that in paradise everything is established on an eternal law, a divine law. An order governs not only paradise, but the entire universe, because, as Beatrice says in her first discourse, all things among themselves possess an order. To use more modern words, those of Einstein's, God doesn't play dice. Eternal law is that enunciated by the eagle. So much is just as does accord with it. It's the law that Jesus hints at when he admonishes, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter into the kingdom of the heavens, but he who does the will of my Father." And it just so happens the eagle says the same thing when he resumes speaking. No one without belief in Christ has ever risen to this kingdom, either before or after he was crucified, but there are many who now cry, "Christ, Christ," who at the final judgment shall be far less close to him than one who knows not Christ. Paradise 19, 103 to 108. Dante translates the gospel, but his way, indeed, of whoever does not know Christ. The gospel doesn't say. Grasping, though, the deep sense, in the following verses he makes the eagle say that Ethiopians and Persians will be saved, and provides a long list of shameful actions by Christian kings and princes. It is conduct in life that counts, not professions of faith. But we return to the question, why has Dante wanted to save this unknown Ripheus? The answer is simple, and is contained in the few verses that Virgil dedicates to him in the Aeneid, where Ripheus is spoken of as Justitissimus, the most just. The syllogism makes no bones about it. If he was a just man, his life accords with the divine will, and as a consequence has merited paradise. It's evident that this is not the position supported by the Church, and least of all by the medieval one. But that is what the New Testament teaches, where the Apostle Peter says that God welcomes whoever fears him and practices justice, whatever nation he might belong to. Page 167. What happens to Ripheus presents further remarkable and embarrassing aspects. We have already seen that by grace God has him see redemption, so that he believes in it, but he was also baptized. More than 1,000 years before baptizing, to baptize him there were the same 3 women you saw along the chariot's right-hand side. Paradise 20, 127 to 129. More than 1,000 years before the institution of the sacrament of baptism, Ripheus receives it directly from the 3 women that Dante has seen in the earthly paradise, and that represented the theological virtues. This is one of the many points on which Beatrice contradicts the orthodox opinions of Virgil, who assured that before Christ there were no human souls that had been saved. And that's not all. Dante actually comes to define Ripheus as Christian. In short, what is presented here is a daring theological prospect, and certainly not orthodox. Also because according to Catholic doctrine, there were no theological virtues before Christ. The eagle's long discourse ends after the unusual baptism of Ripheus, with a further exhortation dealing with judging. At this point Dante comments, "So, from the image God himself had drawn, what I received was gentle medicine, and I saw my short-sightedness plainly." Paradise 20, 139 to 141. According to the Bosco Reggio edition, but the other commentators say more or less the same thing. Verse 141 means to present better the limitations of my view, and the gentle medicine would consist in the fact that Dante had now well realized that his vision, like that of all creatures, cannot, nor ever could, reach to the depth of the eternal counsel. There would be nothing gentle in medicine of this kind. No, the divine eagle has given a gentle, pleasant answer to the initial distress in question, because page 168. Just a little common sense is enough to understand that what was explicitly said about one, Ripheus, applies implicitly for all the just of every time and country. Therefore, also for that one who was born by the bank of a river in India. An answer in absolute agreement with all Dante's thinking that, as it had no limitations in his citizenship, so much so that he wrote, "As far as I'm concerned, my country is the world, as the sea is for fish," as much as, with better reason, he could not admit limits to his concept of God. His God is that one who circumscribes all, in whose profundity, ingathered and bound by love into one single volume, what in the universe seems separate, scattered. Paradise 33, 85 to 87. The eagle has made his view clear. He has freed from limitations, yes, that, of believing good and just men and women damned for eternity, who, for length of time or distance, have never known what? The historical figure of Jesus of Nazareth. And Dante, with an audacity that we will never praise enough, renders us participants in this his great vision of a truly universal Christ, who welcomes everyone who does the will of the Father. This is what you call gentle medicine. One more consideration remains. From the discourse, we clearly infer that, to the ends of salvation, there is no necessity for baptism, understood as a sacrament bestowed by the Church.